Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz Interview Series with Israeli-born, New York City-based jazz saxophonist Arnan Raz. He reached out to Neon Jazz recently, and we are very glad that he did. His latest album is called Chains of Stories, and it's another great modern-day jazz album, and his vignette of stories is really unique. He was born and raised in a small communal village outside of Israel called Kibbutz, and his family members are very steeped in the arts and music. That gave him a backbone to want to play the sax at the age of 13. From there, he made his way to America, and now is in the jazz scene and looking towards the future. So please get to know him and dig this interview, my friends.
So, hey, thanks for reaching out to me, man. I appreciate you sending the album over. It's always great to discover new cats out there doing the good jazz work.
And I appreciate you digging it.
Right on. So let's hop right in here and talk about the elephant in the room, which is Chain of Stories, your newest album. And I love the cover of it. You know, it took me a couple minutes. I was like, what is that? And once I got in there, it just has a nice feel to it. I dig it.
Nice, thank you.
So talk to me about this album. It seems like there's some mellow tunes, and then you get into it, it gets a little loud. You kind of got a good texture going on here. So talk to me about how you feel about the album.
So, I feel good about the album. So the title song came from an idea of composing ideas. I thought about childhood games that we used to play, where one kid would write a short story, and then the next one would kind of like, without seeing what was written before, would add to it, and then you would end up with a weird kind of like out story. So like every day I would just write a phrase. It took me 5 minutes every day to write one phrase until I had all the melody done. And then I did the same thing with the harmony until I had this tune. And then I kind of like thought about the idea of chains of stories, about in a philosophical way, that one story creates another story, and kind of like that's how life goes. I named the other compositions also kind of like these are stories from my life, characters from my life, her story, his story, our story. Were written thinking about some people from my life.
That's cool, man. And, you know, it just proves right there with that story and that vignette of what you weave together is that children are geniuses, because at the end of the day, really all our life is exactly what you just said. All we do year to year, moment to moment, is build these narratives, and we all have these very strange narratives and stories in our lives, and that's kind of what happens. You know what I'm saying? So it's cool you captured that in music. But let's go to the beginning of your narrative in your life. You were raised in a small village north of Israel. Talk to me about your childhood, your family, and how you got into jazz.
Yes, so actually I'm from Kibbutz, which is it's a village. But what's unique about this village, I think you have it only in Israel. It's like a village where you share everything. It's almost like a commune. There were communists back then, and so all the kids were basically growing up together. It was a wonderful childhood, I must say. So this is my childhood. My family, my grandfather is a musician. He was a painter and a musician. He was kind of like the music teacher of the village. He taught music lessons. He came from a classical background. And then two of his children, my uncle is a conductor, a classical conductor. And my mom is a classical guitar teacher. And then my brother, my older brother, is 12 years older than me, is also a guitar player, and he started with jazz. So he studied jazz in the Jerusalem Academy when I just started playing the saxophone. So when I just started to play the saxophone, he was already a jazz student at the Jerusalem Academy. So basically, that's how I got into jazz. He used to have a lot of records. So the first records I heard were Love Supreme and Coltrane Sound. I remember that. So that's how I got into jazz. Saxophone, I'm not sure why I chose saxophone. One day I just told my mom that I want to play saxophone, but I'm not sure why I said that. And I was 13, which is not so young to start playing music. My family didn't put any pressure on me. I just one day at the age of 13, I decided to play the saxophone.
So did you know that you were going to make a career out of jazz when you decided that, you heard Coltrane, you got the sax, and you were getting into music? Was this something you saw you doing in your life?
So my brother set the example and my uncle set an example. And right at the beginning, I would practice with my grandfather, who would, he already passed away, but back then he was already in his late 80s. So every day at 4 p.m., I would go to his place and we would practice together. So I had this routine of practicing every day since day one. So I kind of like, when you just start to play instruments and you practice every day, the progress is really fast. And so pretty soon, I don't know, I was serious about it. I can tell you that at the age of 13, I thought about a career, but after a few years, I was serious, and I certainly wanted to be a professional musician.
So you come from this wonderful childhood in a commune in Israel. You moved to the United States to go to school, then eventually New York City. What kind of transition did you have to go through mentally and just overall to get to the point where you go from this small communal village to this big, huge mass of America?
At the age of 18, I joined the IDF orchestra. That's what musicians who go to the army, that's where they go. It's like a marching band. So I spent 3 years there from the age of 18 until the age of 21. And there I met many young musicians from Tel Aviv, which is the big city of Israel. And actually I met my bandmates at the IDF orchestra, Eyal Chai and Danny Danor, Daniel Meron and Tamir Schmerling. I met them all at the IDF orchestra at the age of 18. And then when we finished the service, I went to study at the Jerusalem Academy, the same academy that my brother went to. And they went to Berkeley. And after 4 years at the Jerusalem Academy, I moved to New York City. And like you said, it was a big transition and a scary one. I have no idea how I did it. It was I wouldn't do it today, but I did it. Yeah.
So, what were some of those early jazz shows you saw there like? Was it just amazing in New York?
Absolutely. All my idols until today. I just saw Brad Meldo Trio at the Vanguard last. It was it was amazing and exciting to come to a city where all your idols and all the musicians you heard when you were a teenager, they play here every day almost. It's exciting. You get used to it eventually. I certainly remember the beginning of being very excited.
Right on.
Yeah.
Why do you love jazz?
I guess, when I started to play the saxophone, naturally you're drawn to the music where saxophone is present, which is, in my case, jazz. In the saxophone case, it's jazz. And then you just, you get into it and you get hooked with it. But I can't explain it really. You just get hooked with it. And in Israel, you have many amazing jazz musicians. So you do have people to learn from. And I had great teachers who also got me into this music and showed me records and taught me this music. So I got into it, and that's it. It's like, it's like a disease almost.
Yeah, I know. It really is. It's a good one, though.
It's a good one.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. Everyone has a version of you, your family, your friends, your fans, those in the business world you deal with. But when you wake up and you face the day, who do you think you are?
I don't know, just a person who wants to create art and who and try to be good and nice to other people.
That's it. That's perfect. That's succinct, to the point, and it wraps it up, man. Thank you again, Arnan, for reaching out to me and sending me over your music. I'm looking forward to profiling you on Neon Jazz. Indeed.
I appreciate thank you so much, Joe.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Israel, New York, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Arnan for reaching out for his time, his music, and stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.